Hello, I'm Richard Gisbert, and you're at The Listening Post. This week, the Blackwater story and the media. What took you so long?
So it turns out we have private contractors in Iraq. Who knew?
Fonts and identity. What the choice between Times New Roman, Helvetica, or Arial Bold says about you. And Iceland pulls out of the coalition. 2 boots made for walking out of Iraq.
This one-man Icelandic army is going home.
Welcome back. Blackwater, the American security company in Iraq that hates the spotlight, has been in the headlines this past week. The Iraqi government released a report which detailed that 38 Iraqis have been killed by Blackwater personnel since 2003. The government says it wants the company out of the country within 6 months. Until now, the story of Blackwater and other private contractors hired by the U.S., thousands of them armed, has failed to grab and hold the attention of the American mainstream media, even though there are more contractors in Iraq than U.S. soldiers. That's our starting point this week, the Blackwater story. Who's been reporting it, who hasn't, and why? The first time the world heard the name Blackwater was in March of 2004. 4 of its contractors were killed in Fallujah, their bodies mutilated and burned. 2 were hung from a bridge.
The whole thing was put on videotape and flashed worldwide, with the result that the U.S. military went into Fallujah and basically flattened this city of 350,000. It really changed the course of the war. And we started looking around and asking ourselves, what is this? What's Blackwater?
Blackwater is one of many private firms hired to work in Iraq by the U.S. government because the Pentagon has too few soldiers to fight this war. They are armed and, according to Iraqis, dangerous. This video posted on the net showing contractors shooting at cars in Iraq, apparently at random, is unofficially linked to a British firm. And this notorious video taken in Najaf shows Blackwater gunmen firing at Iraqi targets. Mainstream media coverage of the contractor's story has been sporadic, to put it kindly. They've failed to follow up on this incident this year when President Bush was asked by a student what laws, American, Iraqi, or military, the contractors were subject to.
This is what delegation, I don't mean to be dodging the question, although it's kind of convenient in this case, but never.
He did not come close to providing an answer. Given the lack of mainstream media coverage, it has been left to reporters like Jeremy Scahill, who authored a book on Blackwater, to dig deeper.
Blackwater USA provides the Bush administration with an extraordinary amount of political cover. The deaths of Blackwater contractors and other war contractors are not included in the total death count, even though some 780 of them have been killed in Iraq. Their injuries don't get calculated either. Their crimes don't get punished.
Another group that's been on the contractor's story is Brave New Films, a Los Angeles company that produced a documentary called Iraq for Sale. The idea was to tell a story the U.S. mainstream media were ignoring.
The reason we made Iraq for Sale is that the whole issue of the privatization of the war is not being discussed. The whole issue of turning significant parts of the military effort over to for-profit companies has not been discussed.
Bill Sizemore did the same. His paper, The Virginia Pilot, is based in the city of Norfolk, about 50 kilometers from Blackwater's headquarters in Moyock, North Carolina.
This is really something new in American history. This is a privatization of military force like nothing this country has ever seen since it's been a country.
Blackwater is a very secretive company. Recently, its head, Eric Prince, testified before Congress, but only because he was under subpoena. The Virginia Pilot worked for months to gain access to the company, and when it did, produced a 6-part series that was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. Now that Blackwater is a global story, reporters are frequently on the phone to the pilot looking for help.
The first question they ask is, how do we get access to Blackwater? How do we get into the facility? How do we get the executives to talk to us? And basically our answer is, good luck, buddy.
It's almost impossible to get Blackwater people to talk to the media, even after they leave Blackwater. Their employment contracts forbid it and can include $250,000 fines for breaching that rule. So when a small paper like The Pilot gets the story, or when an author like Jeremy Scahill produces a well-received book on Blackwater, mainstream news media usually follow up in big numbers. But this story has been different.
Print journalists did a good job, and every once in a while would report that story. And then TV would completely ignore it. So what's the problem? They think, well, if nobody's talking about it, then we can't talk about it because it'll seem like we're pushing an agenda. No, your agenda is the news. If it's news and it's relevant and it's real, then you should cover it. We shouldn't have to tell you to cover it.
For the most part, this is not only a complicated subject, which takes time and resources, it's also politically very dicey, because you're talking about many of these contractors who have very strong ties to the administration. That's not something that the primary media wants to go into.
The contractor story has been bubbling beneath the surface in Iraq ever since that day in Fallujah, and it erupted again after the shootings in Baghdad. It's one of those news stories that reveals a lot about the people who cover it.
I think it has exposed kind of a fundamental truth about today's media culture, which is that it's a mile wide and an inch deep. Very few in the media are really exploring the underlying issues.
Should we be turning war to profit?
What does it mean that we have a private entity using force in the name of this country?
What role can we in the media serve? What role can we not serve?
There are a lot of fundamental questions that need to be asked, and I'm afraid that a lot of that gets lost in the media circus.
And when the news media lose their way on a story, be it about the reasons for going to war or who is fighting that war, the consequences can be deadly. Our Global Village Voices now, and their take on Blackwater and the news media.
The media has been lax on the Blackwater scandal for multiple reasons. The first, defense contracting is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and in the U.S., profit comes before reason. The second, the media and war detractors are unwilling to deviate from the mainline position because it's working. Aside from Abu Ghraib-style critiquing, our media hasn't forced our U.S. forces, which seems to include contractors, to any standard of accountability, no matter how many war crimes they commit or how their position jeopardizes peace and stability in the region.
This is not a news story. This is really a big concept that the media should be focusing on, the business of war, and the increasing trend to privatize war, which has been going on for some years now. But instead, we're talking about Britney Spears. And I think that viewers should really be demanding a lot more from their media and a lot better coverage of their world, because what's happening in the Hollywood, the gossip industry, is not going to change the way things happen in Iraq today.
I think the media has stayed away from it. They've done a poor job. And even at this moment now, they finally jumped on the bandwagon, but only because Nouri al-Maliki brought up the issue. And I think that's something that the Arabs world should understand about the Western media. Many American media will do everything they can to avoid issues like this, to not get into a fight with the White House. That is until they're forced to deal with it.
If you'd like to be one of our Global Village Voices and tell us what you think of the world's news media, just email us at listeningpost@aljazeera.net. We'll walk you through the technology and add your voice to the mix. Time now for Listening Post News Bites. Investigators in Moscow are now saying that they know who pulled the trigger in the murder of journalist Anna Politkovskaya, but they don't know who ordered the killing. Politkovskaya, whose persistent reporting of atrocities in Chechnya angered the Kremlin but won her international recognition, was shot and killed in October of last year. Her former paper, Novaya Gazeta, quotes the lead investigator in the case saying, "We haven't charged the killer yet, but we know who he is." 10 people have already been arrested in the Politkovskaya case. Well, it took a while, but that scandal at the BBC, in which Britain's Queen was made to look angry when she really wasn't, has finally claimed some victims. 2 executives, including the head of the BBC's main TV channel, have resigned as a result. So has the head of the outside production company that made the documentary. In the incident between the Queen and celebrity photographer Annie Leibovitz, Elizabeth was shown to be storming out of the photo shoot when she hadn't. The images used actually showed her walking in. Queengate, as this episode was inevitably called, was one of many cases of fakery that landed British broadcasters in trouble recently, damaging their credibility with audiences. An independent inquiry has criticized misjudgments, poor practice, and ineffective systems at Britain's public broadcaster. The BBC has apologized. Rush Limbaugh, the influential right-wing talk radio titan in the U.S., may have picked on the wrong target this time. Limbaugh generally supports the Bush administration and is pro-Iraq war. He recently told his listeners that U.S. troops who criticize the war are phony soldiers. Check out this response put together by a veterans organization in the U.S.
Rush, the shrapnel I took to my head was real. My traumatic brain injury was real. And my belief that we are on the wrong course in Iraq is real.
Limbaugh's show is carried on U.S. Armed Forces radio, and now the veterans groups are out to change that, saying essentially that he is not worthy of a place on the dial. And how's this for a media protest against a government? Last Sunday, 22 independent and opposition newspapers in Egypt refused to publish. That was their way of protesting the prosecution of several Egyptian journalists. In one of the cases, the editor of Al Dastur, Ibrahim Issa, is accused of publishing wrong information about President Hosni Mubarak after his newspaper printed several stories saying Mubarak was either seriously ill or dead. State prosecutors somehow concluded the reporting of those false rumors prompted investors to take $350 million out of the Egyptian economy in less than a week. The Egyptian press syndicate has said the case amounts to a declaration of war on the news media. Life is not easy for Egyptian journalists these days, but there have to be more effective means of protest than taking the day off, while newspapers that support the president are publishing news stories favorable to the government. Coming up after the break, fonts, the media, and you.